Mr. President, the Senate's not in order.
Senate will be in order. Please take your conversations off the floor.
This is yet another reason to celebrate the approval of the second successful vaccine, and I'm eager for the Moderna vaccine to arrive in healthcare facilities across Texas. Now, Mr. President, that brings me to the business that remains before the Senate today and likely for the next couple of days. After months of trying to come together on coronavirus legislation, the last several days have given the American people a lot of reason to hope. First of all, it seems like for the first time in months, there's actually bipartisan interest in achieving an agreement. That wasn't the case in the run-up to the election, where we had at least 3 or more cloture votes fail in the Senate. Mr. President, the Senate's still not in order.
The Senate will be in order. Please take your conversations off the floor.
So for months, additional coronavirus relief was defeated by our Democratic colleagues who weren't even interested in the run-up to the election on providing additional relief after the CARES Act passed last March. But hopefully that has all changed now after the election. Negotiators are working around the clock to reach an agreement that will gain the support of both parties and reach the president's desk before we gavel out for the holidays. But the days are dragging on, and the clock is ticking, and the time is running out. But, Mr. President, I want to mention two things one about the process, and the other is about the substance included in whatever the package will look like. First of all, given the way that this is being negotiated, basically there are 4 people who are negotiating this massive spending package on behalf of the 535 members of Congress. And essentially, because this has been pushed off until these last days of the 116th session of Congress, the only thing most rank and file members will be able to do is to vote up or down. In other words, there's no opportunity to amend it through regular order. I just have to say, this is a terrible way to do business. And in the future, I hope we do better, because this is almost the worst of all worlds when it comes to legislating. But we know our back is against the wall because of the politics leading up to the election, where we weren't able to do more since March, and so we have to do what we have to do. The second thing I want to mention, which is more about substance, Mr. President, is about the Paycheck Protection Program and the deductibility of ordinary business expenses. I believe the Paycheck Protection Program has been one of the most successful parts of our COVID-19 economic relief. The goal, of course, was to provide small businesses access to low-interest loans, which could be converted into grants based upon their willingness to maintain their payroll and keep their employees connected with the business. The hope was that these businesses would survive and would rebound after we got the virus in the rearview mirror. We didn't know how long that was going to last, and indeed it's lasted longer than any of us would have wanted or had planned. But it's important that this Paycheck Protection Program be revived, because time is running out. In my state, roughly $41 billion has been loaned with potential for grants to about 417,000 businesses. This has been an essential part of our response to the COVID-19 and the economic fallout associated with it. But, Mr. President, when we passed the PPP program in March, the Congress expected that businesses that got the loans that were converted to grants would be able to deduct their ordinary business expenses in the year 2020. Now, I know that may not be the best tax policy in the world, but we can choose one of 2 ways to get financial relief to these small businesses. We can shovel money in the front door, or we can allow them to deduct their ordinary business expenses, even though they have received a grant from the federal government. The reason why I say I know this is part of the understanding in March when we passed the bill is because I have now, because of Treasury Department opposition to the deductibility of ordinary business expenses to the recipients of the PPP grant, because of the Treasury Department's position that those are not deductible, we've had to file legislation which will make sure will override the Treasury Department guidance and allow for that deductibility. Again, this is not an ideal way to write tax policy, but under the exigent circumstances here, I think it makes perfect sense. Again, you can either write more checks on the front end, or you can allow businesses financial relief by deducting their ordinary expenses on the back end. What I fear will happen because of the opposition of the Treasury Department is that come January, the businesses that have received this incredibly important PPP benefit will find themselves having to pick up, having a tax bill which will reverse, if not negate, the benefit that we intended by developing the PPP program in the first place. This will happen as early as January when many businesses have to pay their estimated tax. And there will be an incredible backlash, I believe, because I think the recipients of the PPP loans and grants have every reason to expect, as Congress intended, that they would be able to deduct their ordinary business expenses. So what's going to happen if we don't fix that in this underlying bill? Well, we're going to end up doing it next year, I promise you, because I think the backlash we're going to feel here from the businesses that have been suffering, been hanging on like a thread, that all of a sudden they have an unexpected tax bill, roughly, according to the Wall Street Journal, about $120 billion worth. We ultimately are going to have to fix that. So we might as well fix it on the front end rather than on the back end after our constituents who've been the recipients of the PPP grants rise up in outrage, really, that we haven't taken care of this now when we should. So I hope that in the negotiations on this COVID-19 relief bill that we include the deductibility of ordinary business expenses for recipients of PPP grants. The funding we provided earlier this year for vaccine distribution has already been depleted, and states are dipping into other sources of funding to ensure they have the capabilities to carry out the widespread vaccination effort. That's another reason why we need to pass this COVID-19 relief bill as soon as possible. Workers lost bolstered federal unemployment benefits at the end of July, and they're set to lose additional benefits the day after Christmas. Small businesses, as I said, are struggling to stay afloat, especially as the winter weather hampers outdoor dining and events. I saw the snow that hit New York, where many of the restaurants, because they've been shut down, indoor dining has been shut down. They've tried to build up some infrastructure outside their restaurants, but even now those have been closed down because of the weather. People are hurting and need help. Parents and teachers are wondering when their children will be able to return to in-person learning and how schools will be able to keep them safe when they do. And the list goes on and on. Earlier this year, we made a $3 trillion investment in our war against COVID-19, and that funding has been critical, not only to get us to where we are today in terms of therapeutics and vaccines, but also to keep our economy from tanking entirely. But these funds are drying up, programs are expiring, and the American people are counting on us once again to provide the support that they need. There appear to be a few remaining sticking points in the negotiations, but there's no reason why Congress shouldn't be able to reach an agreement. The steady drip of information from congressional leaders is encouraging, but progress doesn't pay the bills. Enough time has been wasted this year on partisanship and political posturing. We've reached a make it or break it moment, and there is no room for inaction. The American people are looking to us to protect their health and their livelihoods, and we cannot let them down. Mr. President, I yield the floor and I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.